Hello?
I'm on. You're on. All right.
Hey.
So welcome back, everyone. It's that time of day when we're right before drinks, so this is probably going to have to really pay the price. We're going to do our best, though, to make it worth your while. I'm very excited to talk today to Richard. He has a long history in this field, and as a researcher, for me, that's, of course, very interesting to kind of see where things go. I'll warn you in advance, I'm a recovering academic, so I might rattle on a little bit longer, especially for a topic like this. But I'll turn it to you very quickly then, Richard. First of all, kind of give us a sense of what you do on a day-to-day basis. Like, what's the job description today?
Sure. I have a weird role because I'm a researcher, a technology researcher, so we do a lot of the interactivity things. Already mentioned iToy and Move and now VR. But also I do the evangelism for our new products, especially VR right now. So I'm kind of at the very beginning of projects and also at the very end of projects.
That's very interesting. So, and then give me a sense of the resume. Like, how long have you been working in the space?
I've been at PlayStation for 17 years, and that's a long time in Silicon Valley world. But my parents owned a video game store in 1983, a retail store. So video games have been a part of my life almost forever.
A real street cred. So then, I guess, first things first, so here we are, beginning of August, we're a few months out from the launch for PlayStation VR. So the first step then in my mind is like, okay, well, you guys are obviously formulating this as a platform, right? So this is not anything other than that. But so how do we think about this in terms of third-party development? I think that's really the big question for, if you frame it as a platform, how do you then cultivate third-party relationships?
Right, because it is a platform, we have, of course, the hardware part of it and then also the software side. And on the software side, we have our own first party, which has to be committed in order to make the hardware fully realized so that there's content. But then always at PlayStation, we've felt like the third parties have to be there to really make the platform complete. Mm-hmm. And it's great with VR. There's such good middleware right now that you can actually get into making a game really quickly. Mm-hmm. There's getting something up on the screen in VR is easier than it's ever been to do anything in games, I'd say, right now.
Mm-hmm. So the real focus for all of the console platforms, arguably, has been on getting third parties to develop content, but it's not as easy for each of them, right? And so, so how would you go about explaining, for instance, to whatever the guys out there and the girls out there that are thinking, I need to be in VR, I need to quit my job and do this for a living. What's the path? Like, can you give a little clarity on how to move forward in that scenario?
Sure. Well, right now, some of the greatest ideas in VR are coming from the indie crowd. I mean, there is no real roadmap of what is the right thing to make in VR. There's so many different things that could work, and people are exploring all over the place. There's kind of this balance, though. There's this great amount of energy and ideas coming out of the indie side. But at the same time, it's really important to have some of these titles that people have heard about before to get the mainstream audience to care about it. So we have things like, like Batman and things like Star Wars coming to our platform. So it creates this great balance of this established things mixed together with these really new ideas. Mm-hmm. And it could be, any developer could be the one to figure out the thing that people will try. And as long as enough VR headsets are out there, somebody making something new will have people to try it out.
We'll have some traction, okay. So I guess as someone who doesn't know how to make games at all, it seems to me, though, that the first thing you would do in any kind of new platform, right, whether we're switching from manuscript culture to print culture, we're always first looking back into what came before, and then we're just moving forward through the rearview mirror in a sense. So what can we expect then, or what's the sort of design agenda here? So obviously at E3 we saw Resident Evil. Obviously we're going to use VR to scare people out of their minds. Right. But so where do we break some new ground in this?
Well, a lot of people ask what the right kind of games to make in VR are, and there is no right thing. We mentioned it's easy to get things up on the screen and be in VR, but the design of what you do there is still not fully fleshed out. But what we do know is there's some things that work very well. The feeling of that presence where you're in a space lends itself to certain kinds of activity. Actually, it lends itself to activity in general. Mm-hmm. Sitting there passively when you're in a place feels kind of awkward. And that's why games resonate so well with VR, is because when you're in VR, you feel like you should do something. Things are happening, you feel they're right next to you, you want to contribute and be part of the action. So interactivity is the number one thing I think that works best in VR that we're finding. So keeping people busy, doing stuff. And then The really big difference with VR is, again, things are all around you. It's not remote, like through a window, like on a 2D screen. So things that are close to you feel very powerful. Things where you can actually reach out and interact with them directly. That doesn't really exist when you're doing things through a window. When on a 2D screen, it's kind of a layer of abstraction. It's always keeping you away. It always feels like there's one step away from what's happening. But in VR, it feels like it's actually you doing that. And that lends itself to a lot of things, like sandbox kind of games are perfect for that, where you can just play. You can just take a very simple thing and just tweak one little thing like gravity or friction, and then all of a sudden you have a whole new world around you that you can interact with. And other things are like superhero kind of situation. So superhero games are already really fun to play normally, but then when it's actually you seeing the fireball shoot out of your hand or levitating something, it's just so much more visceral when it's you doing those actions.
So I guess arguably there is a transition here from more passive entertainment to more active or even interactive entertainment.
Right.
So what does that look like? I mean, are we now breaching on sort of a mimetic experience for people where you truly become it, or is it still like how do you close the gap from a design perspective in your mind?
Yeah, I think it's we've already been doing first-person games, so that already is a thing that comes over quite well. And then third-person games in VR also are still not off the table. There's some great third-person experiences that work. I think that another thing that it really works well is any world that you would want to visit. People already have some places from books or from movies that they'd like to try. And just getting to be in that space is another great thing. So that's why maybe the existing designs of games don't come over so well, but the existing worlds of games come over really well.
Right.
There's actually a new game that we have is this game that I first played in 2D, and it was this beautiful world. It's called Bound, and it just reacts to the player, the third-person character as he moves around. And then I just really wish I could be in that world. Right. And of course, now they have a VR version of that, and you go in, and it's exactly what you would want it to be. It feels like you're seeing that world all around you, and you just feel completely like you're there. And that's kind of the beauty of what VR gives you for games, is feeling like you're there.
But then, I have to ask this question, of course. So as a researcher, we get confronted by this. And so in many ways, we're strapping devices on people's heads. So how do you make it so that we're doing something immersive, but still kind of keeping it social? Like where does that go?
Yeah, that's something that my lab's worked on a lot lately. Last year we worked with NASA on this kind of cooperative experience, a little bit similar to the toy box, which was mentioned earlier, where you can reach out and hand things back and forth and talk with voice chat to somebody. And then we worked on full body avatars, and so you could see the other person's full body. And now there's a lot of different social things going on, and there's, we have some multiplayer VR games that are coming out. But I think that social experience of being in another place with somebody, there's really nothing else like that. That's one of the most powerful aspects of VR. And so there's a lot of different ways to get a social engagement in VR. You can have two people over a network in this kind of shared space. But also we're finding you can have people in the same real world space interact with a person in VR, and that can be a really we call it asymmetric VR or asymmetric gaming. So some people are playing through the 2D screen while other people while someone else is in VR. So yeah, I think that we have the Playroom game that comes with our PlayStation VR for free, because we really want to encourage that kind of experience where people are not isolated, they're more connected to what's going on.
And then that's on the screen, right? But so what is your experience being off the screen? So, it's so easy to forget that we as an industry, to some degree, are an echo chamber, right? We're all very excited, it's cool. But, consumers, how do they seem to, do they pick it up intuitively? Like, what are the sort of experiences you've had, like showing it just even to your family, for instance?
Yeah, I have 3 boys, so they all, 21, 18, and 16 years old. So the 18-year-old had a friend over, and we happened to have it at home that weekend, so he tried it, and then he called his parents to come over and try it. Right. That's kind of pretty interesting for an 18-year-old to call his parents to come over. And so they came over, and then they called their other son, and his girlfriend came over. So pretty soon our house was full of people just trying VR. And it's because it's so different, it's so powerful of an experience.
That's interesting. I've never heard of a 17 or an 18-year-old inviting their parents or anything. So, then the question, of course, next is, so in 2 months or 3 months, the device comes out. How do we get this in people's hands? Like, it's one thing to have this, pie in the sky dream that we've all been working towards, and VR goes back decades in terms of this amazing imagined space. But how do we actually operationalize it? How does Sony, perhaps more pertinently, actually get this done? Like, how do they build that platform?
Well, we started in 2010, and it started as a kind of grassroots engineering effort, and it expanded into a full project, indoors. And at the time, it seemed like it was going to be more towards the enthusiast. It wasn't the year of VR like it is now, but we still felt it was really important as a company to do it. And of course, we have a long history of manufacturing consumer-level hardware, and so for us, it's a pretty straightforward thing to bring a product like this to market. But what we realized is that there's some really important differences with VR, and you can't broadcast it. It doesn't broadcast well. So the most important thing is to let people try it for themselves. And that's a very big challenge, because, but we decided that's what we would actually take on as a challenge for our company. So we have two major ways that we're trying to deal with that. One is through the idea of a demo disc, which is kind of an old thing that used to happen back in the day, and now it's happening again. But the reason it's so important in VR is it might be, you can't have a game that for 2 straight hours is completely amazing, every bit of it. So if somebody comes over and you want to show them a demonstration of it, you want that like ultimate 5 minutes of awesomeness that you can give somebody. And so the demo disc is like these 5-minute nuggets from each one of the games that encapsulates that. So I think that's one prong approach. The other one is actually being in stores. And this is just pretty much a brute force kind of effort. We plan to do 500,000 demos by the end of the year in Best Buy and GameStop.
So you'll have a human in the store.
Yeah, it's really important to make sure that the experience is good, especially if it's the first experience anyone's ever had. So we have a person in there running the demos who knows what what the person's supposed to experience and make sure they have a good time doing it.
Right, of course. It's the I'm always reminded of other attempts to sort of penetrate the console market by the incumbents, and at retail it's always a tough thing, right? You have to have the kiosk, which you pay for yourself, and that's kind of an expensive but critical part of it. You have to have the distribution set up, and then ultimately, of course, it's an expensive device to some degree, right? I mean, it's $399, but still it's extra money out of people's pockets, and it's really going to require some killer applications to get it there. So,
and what we're seeing, like in the stores, one of the things is different people have different tastes. So it's important to have an offering that might match people's tastes. Having one single experience is not the right answer. So we're finding like some people are really into space kind of thing, and they want to play Eve Valkyrie there. And other people, they don't know anything about it, and they want something maybe a little bit more that feels like a Disney ride. So you have this kind of ocean descent part of the VR worlds. And then there's other ones who want kind of an action game. So we have all those different choices, and we give the person who's there a choice, and then it's more likely that they'll have an experience that resonates with them that way.
So it's from what I've seen so far, from all the different platforms, it's a pretty immersive sort of telling thing, right? So then if lots of people are going to make content for this, what does that curation process look like? How do you make sure that it stays within certain parameters to present an experience that you guys want to present?
Sure, probably more than any other kind of content, it matters in VR, because it is completely replacing the entire world around you with this generated content. And we have the luxury that because we're on a fixed platform, a game developer can actually tune their experience exactly and know how it will play in everyone's home. And so we also have a set of checklists that we check over to make sure, a technical requirements list, to make sure it will be a good experience for people. And I think that's important. We want creative content, but we also want to make sure that the content that does go into people's homes is a good experience.
So I guess my main question for you then at the end would be, you've seen so much more than anybody else in this room, with, especially of course for your own platform. But so what gets you excited? I mean, you're at this point the most jaded VR consumer here. Where do you, what gets your bell rung? Or what gets you going?
Yeah, actually the thing that is most amazing to me is I do have this luxury because I go to a lot of events and I know a lot of the researchers. I get to see things really early stage and I get to see the final polished things from all the companies. But I'm amazed that there's still stuff every time when I try that surprises me. I've tried location-based VR, and there's some really amazing experiences people are making in that. And recently, I tried one of our own internal things, and I was shocked at this new kind of experience I felt. It's actually with a PlayStation VR aim controller. And, it's a Farpoint is the experience. And I've tried experiences where you have an interactive kind of, I don't know, plasma cannon or whatever that thing is, and you're looking down, and there's just a little ledge. And I've been on a ledge, I don't know how many times in VR, but you're walking along, and because you're holding this thing in your hand, and it feels like you're looking down, you're seeing it visually as this really heavy thing, the sense of vertigo that I got was way more amplified than I'd gotten before from just the ledge, because it felt like that thing was going to pull me over. The weight of it was kind of leaning out over the edge. So I should have known that probably, that would be that effect, that kind of multiplier effect, but it still surprises me when things like that happen. And then actually the research that we're working on right now, I'm really excited about. This whole idea of social presence, we were talking about social VR, but also you can get a feeling of social presence from autonomous characters or virtual characters, virtual agents. So when you're in another space with these game characters, it's different than when you're seeing them on the television, because you can see what their heads are looking at. You can hear multiple voices talking spatially around you, and they feel like they're actually there more with you. And so you can have this presence from a non-game character, and they can actually feel more intelligent in how they react. And that, I think, is a really rich area for research that I'm excited about.
They're responding to AI and have a much more detailed experience in terms of facial expressions and so on.
Yeah, and also like just having a character turn and look at you and then look over at his friend, and then if he picks up something and hands it over to you, all of this is virtual, but you just start to buy into it much more, and you feel completely immersed in what's happening because of the social feeling of some other agent kind of giving you that belief that this thing really is happening right now.
Well, needless to say, I'm excited myself. I would invite everybody here, since we're at the end of our time, to take a moment afterwards to come find Richard and ask any other questions. I would like to ask you all to please join me in applauding for him and say thank you for coming out. We'll go to the end. Nice work.